Was the character of Sam Jones, was that fully formed?
Yes, yes, it was, but it was a different show. Andy, the concept for a new show that Andy and Bob Ross, who was the producer of the Andy Griffith Show, at the end, they had written it around somebody who was supposed to have been an Army acquaintance of mine when I was stationed in Italy for some reason when I was in the service. Sam Jones, the character, had been in the Army in Italy. And I needed a hired hand, and just on a whim, I wrote and asked him if he'd like to be my hired hand. And he and his whole family came over, including a beautiful young sister and kids and a grandfather and everything. And that was the show that we shot as the pilot or the spin-off. And the network wasn't crazy about that. And they talked to Andy and Bob, and they said, just make it Mayberry with a couple of new people, and that's what they did.
So when you came on Andy Griffith, was there already a succession plan in place? Did you know when you joined that this was going to be his last year and that you would be replacing him?
I did know that it was going to be his last year, and I also knew that the new show, Mayberry RFD, was going to go on for a year. And it was the best offer I had. I had an offer to start Laugh-In because I had been on the Laugh-In special. But I knew that, for one thing, that I would be in with a big company of very funny people who were very good at that, and I wasn't that good, and also this was a lead in a series, and with a whole season guaranteed, it was unheard of for me.
So why did the Andy Griffith Show end after 8 seasons? It was still doing well in the ratings. Did Andy want to end the show?
Yes, he did. He and Don Knotts had an agreement, an oral agreement, that after 5 years they would walk away from it. But Andy was still doing so great, the network didn't want him to go, and people thought that without Don, who wanted to move on and do motion pictures, had a contract at Universal, I think, to make motion pictures, and in those days, incidentally, that was a step up, out of television into the movies, that was a step up. And so that's what Don did. But Andy stayed on, and he just stayed up there in the ratings all the way. And the last year he was on the air, he was #1 for the season.
So what was it like for you stepping into a show that was so established and you're the new guy? Was that hard? Did they welcome you in? What was that like?
Well, naturally it's scary. You go into it with apprehension, great apprehension. All you hope is that you don't hurt it, because I had nothing to do with the success of the Andy Griffith Show. I wasn't even a character in the town or anything. And I just hoped that I wouldn't do anything wrong, and that's all. And there were a couple of new characters. Arlene Galanka played a new character called Millie, and she was my love interest. And then Frances Bavier, thank goodness, decided to stay on and play Aunt Bee. And then George stayed on and played Goober.
George Lindsay.
And then there was Paul Hartman, who was the fix-it man, Emmett. And Jack Dodson, who played, what was his job? I can't remember now. He was a town council or something.
Yeah.
And
Howard Sprague was Jack Dodson, right? The actor,
yes,
Howard Sprague.
Yes, I was trying to think of the name of his, also the name of his position in the town government, because that's what the first episode, I think, was where I run for town council and I win. So I become the head of the town council, and Millie had a bakery shop. That's what it was.
How did the character Sam Jones differ from Andy Taylor?
Well, they had a lot in common. Andy was a lot funnier. Of course, Andy, as a matter of fact, during the course of his show, he found out that his character worked better being a straight man for Don Knotts' character. And so that's primarily what they did, and sure worked out well for them. very well.
So, well, you talked about how the character was integrated into the show a little bit, but when you were working with the cast and crew initially, were they welcoming? I mean, did they bring you in and they were supportive in the beginning?
Yes, they were very the crew and the cast. Yes, they were very welcoming, because actors get along a lot better than most people give them credit for. You know, I think actors are often prejudged. People think that you're going to have an ego and you're going to be working with prima donnas and stuff. But the atmosphere almost everywhere has been welcoming, you know, and especially in that case, they hated to see Andy go because, you know, they probably didn't think it was going to succeed.
Was there anyone there who helped you, gave you advice, helped you kind of make the transition that you were close to?
Andy, primarily, and Bob Ross, who was the producer. And Bob, incidentally, was a wonderful writer. And he had done other kind of homey type shows on television. And he had his, they just knew how to write for that specific kind of humor. That was very gentle, you know. Don used to refer to it as hidden hip. Don was from the same part of the country. He was from West Virginia, and Andy was from North Carolina. And so they had a lot in common. They were great friends. And anyway, Andy gave me a lot of advice. And of course, you just learn by watching, too. It was a show unlike anything that I had done because Andy liked to spend a lot of time on the script. And so we'd go to the read-through that would normally only last, you know, an hour for a half-hour show or whatever. And then you'd get up and then you start blocking. But with Andy, he'd sit at that table for a long time and he'd be sure everything was right and everything was on the page. You know, I wasn't used to working that way. I thought, well, if I want to change a word or a phrase here and there, I can do it on the set. Sometimes I would do it when the cameras were rolling because I knew I wouldn't get away with it if I asked him if I could change something. That's another thing about working in those days. You had to be, I mean, in my experience, you had to be word for word. And this minute that said cut, the director would check to see that you said all the words right. And they'd check with the continuity person, and if it was okay, then they'd print it.
Let me ask you about some of the cast members, just maybe a quick memory or something, that maybe an anecdote about working with them. But let's start with Andy. Any scenes that you particularly remember, or anything about just working with him?
Andy, yeah, like I said, we really hit it off right away. And we got to be good friends. And even long after he had left. And he came back, incidentally, and did guest shots. So to keep the ratings up, I suppose, and it worked. And we used to go out in his motorhome. I had a motorhome too, but he had a great big one, and he had a rack on the back for trail bikes, and he and oh nuts, Greenway, Al Greenway. No, not Al. Al was his brother. Lee Greenway, I'm sorry, was the makeup man.
Okay.
And he was this kind of a courtly Southern gentleman, and he worked with everybody in the business. And so did Al, and so did their other brother. But we would get in the motorhome, and we would drive out to a hunting club that Andy belonged to, and Jack Dodson and Andy and Lee would shoot. They would go shoot skeet or whatever, or they'd actually hunt, and I don't hunt, so I just sat in the motorhome and waited for them to be done, and then we went and played with the motorcycles. There were acre upon acre of open territory and roads and trails and stuff, and we spent a lot of time together and had a lot of fun.
Okay, what about Ron Howard, played Opie?
Ron Of course, it didn't stay on with the cast of Mayberry RFD, but I got a chance to meet him and work with him. And I remembered they had a backboard on the set, on the stage, sound stage, and that was put in there just for Ronnie. And we shot baskets. We played horse and stuff, you know, on the stage, and played the banjo and the guitar and stuff. And it was a good place to work. It was fun. And I remember going away, having worked with Ronnie, and thinking, what a great kid. Boy, his parents must have done something right. You know, he was a great kid. I wonder whatever happened to him. Didn't go anywhere.
Did you ever see him as an adult or later on?
Beg pardon?
Did you ever cross paths with him in recent years?
No, I didn't. No, he works in another class, with another class of actor.
Now, when you came on to Andy Griffith's show, Don Knotts had already left the show,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Tell me about Frances Bavier, who stayed as Aunt Bee.
Frances, I liked her so much, but she was this actress, you know, and I think that she wanted to be known the way some of her contemporaries were known as this theatrical actress, you know. But she had gotten this job as playing Aunt Bee and became famous for it, you know. And she didn't really appreciate it that much, I don't think, until later on in life. And then she capitalized on it, you know. She had fun with it, but she always probably wanted to be a more serious actress, you know. But she was a very nice lady and very sweet. I loved her, and I loved her replacement, Alice Ghostley, who was a very funny lady, you know. I remember her from, well, I didn't see it on stage, but there was a review that she did in New York. That I'll never remember the name of that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. What about George Lindsay, who played Goober?
George, I was a great admirer of his. You know, he created that character, and he was terrific. You know, and then Jim Neighbors came along, and he was funny too. And the two of them together were hysterical. They're just these out and out rubes, you know, and you know, but with hearts of gold, of course. That was a terrific. He got all the laughs that were on the page. That's for sure. Good actor.
So what was the premise of Mayberry RFD, and how was it different from the Andy Griffith Show?
Well, to begin with, the Mayberry RFD was supposed to feature me and a whole family of Italian immigrants. I was supposed to have been in the Army at some point, and I met them in Italy. And I was in need of a hired hand. And I wrote to him and asked him if he would like to come and be my hired hand. It would be a job. He'd get him, you know, he'd get to this country, and maybe, who knows, he might branch off and do something else, or it might be a step up for him. And anyway, but he shows up with his entire family, including his grandfather and his sister, who's the beautiful. I think they had in mind that was going to be the love interest for my character. But for the concept, we did a pilot. We shot the show. And the network, I don't think, ever liked the idea of doing that. I think they wanted to feature Mayberry and all the characters in Mayberry, and they wanted to keep it just like it was. And so they dropped the idea of the Italian family. And we just went ahead with the characters in Mayberry and kept, you know, really one of the big stars of Mayberry RFD was the town itself. It was like visiting Brigadoon once a week. You know, it was a wonderful place to visit. And it never existed, and it was idealized. And but people loved to visit there, including me. I watched every Andy Griffith show I could see.
So this pilot you described, was it actually ever shot, or was it just the concept phase?
They actually shot it.
And was it shot during the final season of the Andy Griffith Show, or before?
No, this must have been done after the Andy Griffith show was done, because that's the only thing we were working on at the time.
Okay.
We had done the last of the Andy Griffith shows.
So what became Mayberry RFD? Had your character been set up at the end of the Andy Griffith show to logically be the sheriff?
They sneaked my character in at the end of the Andy Griffith run, and I can't remember how many episodes I did, but I must have done several, just to get their audience kind of used to the idea that here was a character, and I'm familiar with him, and he comes into town rarely, but he's part of Mayberry.
And the title, Mayberry RFD, what does that refer to?
I used to, nobody here is old enough to remember that really, but I used to have to address my postcards or my letters to my Aunt Alma and Uncle Bob. They lived in the country, and it means rural free delivery. That is something that you had to put on the envelope, and the route number as well, because they lived out in the country, you know.
So in that Mayberry, the town, did live on in the next series. What happened to the characters of Andy and Opie and Barney Fife? How were they written out of the show?
Andy Don had gone up to another police agency at the state level, North Carolina. I think it was Raleigh. And I think Andy did the same thing when he left. They might have gone to the same place. And Frances, I don't remember how they wrote her character out. I can't remember. But anyway, in real life, Frances wanted to retire for sure. And what she did is she went down to a place in North Carolina where she used to go occasionally to lose weight. She had a weight problem, and there were places down there in this one area of North Carolina where, well, it was Andy Griffith territory in North Carolina, and that became home for her. She actually went back to the real Mayberry. You know.
So what was it like for you to carry the torch? I mean, one series ends with Andy Griffith, so iconic. The very next year, Mayberry RFD starts, and you're the star of that. How was that for you back then?
Well, with the help of everybody, really, they were very supportive, and with the help of Andy, who came back and guest starred in several episodes of Mayberry RFD, in order to keep the ratings up, and it worked. We rated very well, and we were even rating well enough to stay on in the third year when we came up against the first season of Monday Night Football. And we had a wonderful lead-in. It was Lucy's show. I Love Lucy, I think it was. And but still, that really took us down in numbers. We were number 3 the first year and the second year, and then we were down to like number 15. But that was certainly good enough to stay on. It was just that there was a man named Freddie Silverman who was the program director at that time, and they just arbitrarily made a decision to get rid of every thing that looked rural. I think they got tired of being kidded about their contemporaries maybe in New York about being called behind their backs the country broadcasting system, when in their minds they bought into more. The CBS in those days was more often referred to as the Tiffany network. You know, they were way up here someplace. But that really was a news division. When it came to sitcoms, you had shows like the Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, you know. And those shows were not like Mayberry in that they were more farcical, but I love farce too. And there was a place for everybody, but they didn't think so. And Pat Buttram, who was a wonderful stand-up comic, and he was on Green Acres, he said that was the year that the CBS canceled everything with a tree in it.
So Andy Griffith was an executive producer on Mayberry RFD. Was he involved on a week-to-week basis, or did he kind of check in on the show? Or?
He was to begin with. And I can't remember how long that went on, to tell you the truth, but he was in a lot of the readings for Mayberry RFD. And it was running well enough without him. I'm sure he thought that. And so he went away and he come back to keep his hand in. Because, as I said, he liked to be very much involved in the writing process. and he wanted to be sure that you were faithful to the characters, which was very important. And he came back often.
So when Mayberry RFD first launched the first season, what was the audience response to you and to you kind of taking over in Mayberry?
You know, I deliberately didn't read reviews. I had gotten one really bad one time on the stage in a theatrical thing. And I thought, well, this isn't doing me any good. You know, I don't want to do this again. So I stopped. I didn't read any reviews. I have no idea what the critics thought about it, or what the critics thought about the Andy Griffith Show, for that matter. You know, it was the people really loved it, and it was a wonderful show. It's one of the best shows, one of the best sitcoms that's ever been on television.
Was the process of producing the show, shooting the show, was it efficient, or did it take a lot of takes, or what was a typical type of shooting week?
That was very efficient. They, I think we shot for 3 days. I think they had a 4-day schedule. They all get mixed up. Yeah. But we'd go in to read the one day, and then, like I said, Andy would want to stay around and do detail work on the script. So they spent a lot of time on that, and then they would go into blocking. And then they would start shooting, and I think we shot for, no, maybe it was 4 days. Maybe they shot for 3 days. And the crew had been together a long time, so they were very efficient. And the script and the actors were ready. And so we finished early on the, I'll say it's third day, very often. So it went pretty easy. That was a well-oiled machine when I got there. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Now, Sam Jones, your character, had a son. Andy had a son. Your son was played by Jodie Foster's brother, Buddy. What was that like? What was he like? And how did that work?
Oh, even, you know, like on television, if you ever saw the show, what you see is what you get. He was a sweet kid. He was a very nice kid. And, but, you know, you have, their minds are frequently elsewhere. And also they have to go to school when they're on the set. You know, they're putting in time with that. I don't know how Ronnie was, because Ronnie was now a teenager, and a pretty big teenager by the time I worked with him. But with Buddy, he looked like he was, his mind was elsewhere sometimes, but he'd get back on track easy enough, and he was such a good kid. And his mom, Brandy, would bring Jodie to the set pretty often, and I think Jodie did her debut on Mayberry RFD. She did a little walk on, the cutest thing you ever saw in your life, you know, just cute. And she stayed cute, luckily.
What was the biggest challenge for you to work in an ensemble show with such a big cast?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Working with such a big cast, having an ensemble on Mayberry, what was the biggest challenge for you?
Oh, I can't say that it was a challenge at all because of the people who were working there. Some people had worked the show before. Some of them were recurring characters. And so that part of it was very easy. And everybody was comfortable. And that really wasn't much of an adjustment at all. And of course, the more people you have on the show, the fewer lines you have to memorize. Yes. Speaking of that, I wonder whatever happened to Jodie Foster.
Who knows?
Gone. History.
Tell me about the fans of Andy Griffith and also Mayberry RFD. Are there still fans, and are there fan conventions?
There is a group, there are several groups, quite a few groups that get together. There's something that my ex-wife goes to because she worked on the show playing Howard Morris's girlfriend. And just on the strength of that, I think she only did about 3 shows maybe. And I think Howie only did about 5. Can't remember the name of his character, but he was crazy. It was wonderful. And anyway, they have an annual thing that they do, and they go down to a place in North Carolina, and they have a big week and people get dressed up and they play the part of Barney Fife and Andy Griffith and all the characters in town, and people are in love with Mayberry, and they live this part, and they live this life for, I think it's 1 week. I think it's a week. And then there are other people, the Andy Griffith Show rerun watchers of America or something like that. I get a newsletter from them regularly, and they tell you what people are doing, even people who are only on the show once or something, and episode number, and entitled so and so. And there are many of those people, and they love the town and the characters and the visit as much as they ever did.
The event in North Carolina, is that called Mayberry Days? Is that what they call it?
It is.
Mayberry Days.
Yeah, thank you, because I wouldn't have remembered that.
Do they, have you been invited or have you appeared at any of these?
I have been invited, however, I didn't have much time at the time they invited me to begin with, and then now I just don't want to travel. I had a little too much of one-nighters and touring. I don't travel anymore. I haven't been on a plane since way back.
Do you hear from fans now about Mayberry, or do people stop you on the street and go, "I loved you in Mayberry RFD"?
Yeah, often I get that when I'm recognized, which doesn't happen very often anymore, but because I don't look anything like I looked then. But yeah, the people who are familiar with my work, of course, that was a highlight, and F Troop was a highlight, and Mama's Family was the last show that I did, the last series.
Tell me about your experience on the Carol Burnett Show as a guest star. How did that come about?
Well, I had met Carol when I was doing a review in Hollywood called the Billy Barnes Review, which was very popular with a lot of people in the business. And Carol came to see the show, and she went back and she told the people with the Gary Moore Show, which she was on at the time, that they should come out and pay attention and watch me and see if they wanted to use me as a guest star. And then they did, and it was a big step up for me. And then I got a special, Carol and her then husband, Joe Hamilton, and her producer, produced a special for CBS starring just 3 people, and I was one of them. It was Rock Hudson and Frank Gorshin and myself. And then I went on as a regular, and I worked every year on the Carol Burnett Show for 11 years. And they were always great to me. I was part of the family, And it was, of all the variety shows, this one was run according to Hoyle. It had a schedule. You knew when you were going to finish. You could make plans. You could make doctor's appointments or whatever. And the other shows weren't always like that because it depended on the star. And Carol was a professional, And well, I'm not really telling tales out of school, and I'm not saying anything bad. It's just that different people like to work it in different ways. The other extreme was when you worked on the Dean Martin Show. Dean showed up on the day of shooting, one day, and because he had that wonderful mind, he had been a croupier, and he could count cards, which probably made him persona non grata in casinos, but he could do that. He had that kind of a terrific mind. And he would come in, and he'd just goof around for a while, and he'd do some music rehearsing and laugh around, and then he would go into his dressing room, and he would watch a run-through with his understudy doing all of his stuff, including a little dance that we did together. And then he would come out of his dressing room, and he would say to Greg Garrison, the director, producer, that he might not like this part of it, he might want to change this or whatever, and they would. And then we'd do a run-through, and then we'd do the show. The audience would be in. That's the way he works. And there was everything in between, everything between Carol Burnett and Dean Martin. And the second show that I worked on was Glenn Campbell. And now all I've ever done is work with the Carol Burnett people. And I walked in, and I knew the producer, and he's sitting alone in his office. And he said, "Ken, what are you doing here?" I said, well, I'm on the show this week, you know. He said, I know that, but what, didn't they call you? And I said, no. He said, well, Glenn's not here. The star is not here. He's in a pro-am tournament down in Phoenix or something like that. He liked to play golf. And that's the way he ran his show. And he liked it loose. And I didn't, I said, well, God, I've only got a few days as usual, and I need to talk to the choreographer and maybe to a dance arranger. I need a dance arranger because I always danced on the show. And he said, well, he's not here either. And I said, well, God, I got to get together and work out my arrangement, my dance arrangement, you know. And I said, by the way, you know, he does tap dance, does he? And he said, no, he doesn't. He had a choreographer who didn't tap dance, couldn't do a number for me. My God. You know, and you've got to be ready by Wednesday, you know, if you start on Monday. And like I say, there was everything in between. It just depended on the star or the producers, the director, or whoever, however they wanted to work. And sometimes it worked fine doing it the other way. But the Carol Burnett show was the gem.
What was the atmosphere on the set of the Carol Burnett?
She did what Gary Moore did when she was working. That's how her big splash in television was on the Gary Moore show in New York. And Gary was a guy who just said, I don't want you to bring any of your troubles in here. You come to work, it's going to be pleasant, or you'll be gone. You know, it was the inference. He was not that kind of a guy. He wouldn't say, or I'll fire you. But that's what it was. And the Carol Burnett show was run the same way, and I saw it happen a couple of times. And Carol was not the bad guy. You know, she let Joe do it, was the producer. But if somebody came in and say got nasty with one of her regular people, like wardrobe people, or with the conductor, or anybody, you know, they wouldn't come back. They just would not come back. And they used to use some stars over and over, particularly in the beginning of their run. They would have recording stars a lot more than they did later on in her run. Excuse me.
Why do you think there was such great chemistry with the cast of the Carol Burnett show?
Beg your pardon?
Why do you think there was such great chemistry with the cast?
It always comes from the highest person in the cast. Or it happens with directors and producers sometimes. When I was a day player and I was going from job to job to job, I got so I could tell, and it didn't happen very often, but you walk up to the sound stage and you've got double doors that are about this thick and you can't hear anything. And there's a little space in between the outside and the inside door to further insulate it from sound. And but I could tell sometimes before I went through the outside door, this is not going to be a good place to work. And it always comes from the star, or it comes from the director. And in terms of what happens on the set, you know, and there were some negative times. Carol Burnett is an angel as far as I'm concerned. I've been in love with that woman for years and years. She's just the best there ever was.
Since you appeared so many times, did you play a certain type of character when you were on Carol Burnett's show?
No, there were no recurring characters that I recall. You know, we always did a different sketch every time I was on the show, different dance number, different scene, different dancers were involved in the production number. No, I can't remember ever repeating a character.
Let me mention just a couple of other shows that you guest starred on around that time, and just if you have a quick comment about them. Sonny and Cher's Comedy Hour.
Yes, I first worked with them on a special that Carl Reiner produced, and it was three married couples who were actually married in real life, and it was Sonny and Cher, and then Jackie and myself, my ex-wife, and then darn it, James Ferrantino and Michelle Lee
Okay.
were married. And there were 3 couples, and it was called The First 9 Months Are the Hardest. And it was all about married couples having their first child. And it was all comedy, and Carl Reiner was one of the writers. And Bill Persky and Sam Denoff were young writers at the time. And they were terrific writers. It was a wonderful show. And then I got a show called Wow that was produced by the people Chris Beard and Alan Bly, who were producing that Andy Williams show that was on the air at that time. I worked with Andy on his first show, which was in black and white, and it was in New York. It was back in the late 60s, I think. No, 50s, late 50s. And then I worked on this version of, Andy had another variety show in the interim that went on for years, and it was a big, beautiful show. And it was more serious than the last one that he did, which was full of blackouts and wild, far-out characters. And Chris Beard and Alan Bly liked to work like that. It was like a Hell's a Poppin' type of variety show. And so I did a summer special called Wow. And these guys produced it, Chris and Alan. And one of the many people that they asked to guest was Sonny. And so Sonny came on. And then not long after that, they had a summer replacement show, and they asked me to guest. You know, he didn't make any money on those shows guesting. He usually did it as a favor to somebody. So I went on and I think I did several of those. And then I also continued and did the Sonny and Cher show during their regular run when they were on in prime time, and not a summer replacement show. And then I also did Sonny's show after he and Cher split up.
And you were on an episode of The Brady Bunch. Tell me about that.
That came along just out of left field. I had I'd done many pilots, and hardly any of them sold, and some of them were very good. You know, I was really surprised. But this one, I decided in favor of because there was word out, and it was pretty serious. It had been going on for a long time, that they were going to rescind the primetime access rule, and they were going to start primetime at 7:30 again. And so if you did that, you needed a lot more family-oriented material. And this was, by the people who did Brady Bunch. And I thought, well, this one probably has a very good chance of going on the air. And Sherwood Schwartz was his name, and his son, Lloyd, were the producers. Nicer people you never met in your life, just great people. And so they had written this spin-off, and it was about a mixed racial adoption. And there were 3 little kids, and me and a wife, and I played an entertainer. So in future episodes, hopefully, there would be opportunity to sing and dance. And it didn't work for some reason, and I thought it was excellent.
But it was part of it was an episode called Kelly's Kids that was part of the Brady Bunch series, right? That was meant to be sort of like a pilot in a way. That was the idea.
Say that again, please.
Was it meant to be sort of a test, even though it was an episode of the Brady Bunch, to see if it would fly?
Well, it was an episode, but it was specifically for a spin-off episode. You could do a pilot, and you didn't have to go to that special extra expense. It was just part of the regular season.
So how was it working with the cast of the Brady Bunch? Florence Henderson.
Oh, fun. I hate to sound like Pollyanna, but actors, I haven't met too many people I didn't like in my life. And writers and producers, and the richest, the biggest ones, to the people who do walk-ons and extras. It's been a wonderful business to be in, and this was no exception. I loved Florence. She was She was a musical entertainer as well, and she did a lot of stuff on the stage. Still, maybe doing it still. I don't know.
And Robert Reed?
Yeah, Robert, he was terrific. Yeah, he was. That's the only time I knew Robert from. I used to do summer stock a lot, and they used to tour a lot. And then sometimes you'd go into summer stock, and you would overlap. You'd come in for rehearsal week, and the show that was playing there, in one instance, was a show starring Robert Reed. And so I met him there, and I met him a couple of times after that. But I didn't really know him well.
What about the kids, the Brady kids?
Well, they were all terrific. You know, they were. Again, I hate to sound okay. I just love everybody and everything, but that's pretty much the way it is.
When that episode wasn't picked up as a pilot, were you disappointed, or did you?
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I was disappointed very much. You know, I can't tell you how deeply disappointed I was each time a series I was on was canceled. I mean, it took me so long to get my first one, and I immediately fell into the second one just by sheer luck, and then and I found out that that's what I loved to do. You know, and going into it, all I ever wanted to be was a motion picture song and dance man. I didn't even have to be the star. I just wanted to be a song and dance band in the movies. And I was deeply disappointed that didn't happen. I can't tell you. It's like a young kid, you know, growing up thinking, you know, he's pretty good at basketball maybe, and he's got a dream about being in the NBA. And you wake up one morning and the headline on the newspaper says, basketball canceled. You know, how could that happen? Musicals had been around before there was sound. You know, they were photographing production numbers and stuff. You know, how could that be? But tastes changed, and they died. You know, I was in Las Vegas at the time, and when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to have a career, and I was devastated. And I was devastated each time I did a good pilot, and I did several of them. I did one with Michelle Lee that was written by Linda. Oh, nuts. I'll think of it in an hour.
Okay.
But she later did Designing Women.
Linda Bloodworth Thomas? Linda Bloodworth Thomas?
Yes, Bloodworth.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Linda Bloodworth was the name
Right.
of the writer, and I remember going home and saying, this is the best pilot script I have ever seen. You know, I felt guilty about being cast in it because I didn't think I could live up to the script. And she's brilliant. She's a wonderful writer. And that one didn't work either.
You were known primarily for comedy roles. What was it like when you were cast on as a guest star in dramatic shows like Medical Center or Little House on the Prairie? Did you enjoy that experience?
Excuse me. Well, you know, I forgot about the Little House on the Prairie, frankly. I always think of Medical Center as being the only dramatic television show that I'd ever done. And it's ironic because when I was young and when I had the money, I would study. And I remember buying a series of dramatic classes, and that only went for about 3 months, and then I couldn't afford it anymore. But during that period, we did all kinds of different scenes from different movies. They'd get movie scripts, and we would play these different characters. But I didn't realize it until many years later, but all we ever did was drama. And I was in contact with a woman that I met in that acting class many years later, and she said, you know, we were all surprised that you did comedy because all you ever did was dramatic acting, and we thought that's the direction your career would go in. But all this time I thought, well, gee, I would like to do a dramatic show. That would be wonderful, a little change of pace, and I would, you know, show my acting teeth and get my teeth into something dramatic. And I got on this job, and I don't want to be disparaging about anybody. Sherry North, whom I had known before, she was in a dance act with a friend of mine named Luigi, and we became a big famous dance teacher. And he was doing an act with a partner, and Sherry North had been in the little chorus that they had. They had about 3 or 4 dancers, and but Sherry, in the meantime, had been brought up by Fox as a possible replacement for Marilyn Monroe, because Marilyn was getting kind of hard to handle and was supposedly unreliable, and I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, she was the next Marilyn Monroe, and she took her acting seriously. And on the set of Medical Center, she wanted complete quiet. And she just had that kind of mind. She couldn't focus if anybody was talking. And after a couple of days of this, I thought, I'm used to a raucous set, laughter and all. And I changed my mind about wanting to be a dramatic actor. I never wanted to try that again. I mean, it got really boring.
When things got slow and there weren't a lot of television roles, what did you do?
I cried a lot. Oh, God. Oh, no, I always dreaded the day when, Carol Burnett used to say, the day when 2 guys show up at your door in suits and they say, it's over. We found you out. You've been fooling us all these years, but it's over now. Well, that day came, and it came in 1990. And after a show that I was doing called Mama's Family was canceled, and I worked after that, but pretty much that was the end of my career. I've worked here and there in the theater, stuff on the road, but I was pretty much devastated. I didn't handle it well at all, and my life changed, and I took it all too seriously. But it was hard, and.
But back when we were doing guest starring roles, and if there were slow times, did you go on the road a lot? Did you do musical theater?
Yes. There came a point in between Mayberry RFD and Mama's Family. There were quite a few years in there. In the first place, the whole pay structure changed. Lou Wasserman was the head of Universal Studios, and people in my position, which is somewhere in the middle, used to be able to, negotiate for money. And then Lou Wasserman decided that wasn't going to happen anymore, and he had this big studio, and he said, if you do a half-hour show, you get $1,500 tops. If you do an hour show, you do $2,500, and that's the top. And we won't pay any more than that for anybody. Well, if you can get 10 jobs in a year, you're working a lot on television, and you may be overexposed even. And you can add it up. That wouldn't even begin to pay the house payments, And I know that's a lot of money for a lot of people, and I'm aware of that, and I'm still aware of it. But still, the reality is you can't. I couldn't keep paying the bills, and so I had to start taking these offers that I'd always had to go out and do summer stock. I thought, well, no, that's a vacation for me. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm going to play around. I'm going to get in my motorhome. I'm going to go to the woods or whatever, or get on my motorcycle. And that's all I did. But now I started taking these offers to do summer stock. And I was dumb about it. I was green. And I didn't know that you could, if you had a little power, you could put together a package and tour maybe, or go out and stay in one place for a while. But I didn't. I was too dumb to do that. I went out and did 1 week here and 1 week there, and doing a different show every time, memorizing a different Broadway show. And I did a bunch of them that first several years. And then I would pick up a tour once in a while. But the tours were, at my level, were all one-nighters. Stars don't do one-nighters. I was, but that was a wonderful experience. And much of the fun of it was knowing that you were bringing theater to some people who were not going to see theater normally. And in some cases, these shows that I was associated with were really well done. Yeah, we did a production of George M. that I'll bet was as good as anything you ever saw in New York. And I'm talking about the other people. I'm not talking about just me. But it was knowing that you were doing that, because I'm crazy about the theater too. It was just terrific to get out there and do it and do one-nighters. In fact, work in places where the people on the top rung of the ladder would probably not do it anymore. You know, we've played places in gymnasiums where the stands come out of the wall in the gym, and they put up these risers, and they can't use any of our sets because it doesn't fit any place and the lighting is not right. But you do theater. You still bring the theater to the people, and it's really can be a lot of fun.
You also did a few feature films, a couple of very popular Disney films in the 70s. You did Herbie Rides Again and The Cat from Outer Space. What were those experiences like for you compared to doing television?
Yeah, there was a big difference. These were not huge budget films, and they didn't pay a lot of money. You know, Disney didn't pay a lot of money to the actors, but it was a wonderful place to work, and so everybody wanted to work there, and especially me, because I had kind of that milk toast look to me. You know, I thought that I'd fit in, and I thought I said something derogatory, and I didn't mean to. Dean Jones epitomized the Disney film actor. He was clean-cut looking, and he was very skilled. He's really good. And Fred MacMurray did a lot of films there, and there was a certain type, and I figured I would probably work there all the time if I got my foot in the door. By the time I did it, I was a little long in the tooth to be playing those young romantic leads, at least, and so I only did those two films, but the people were all so nice, and it had the best commissary in the business, if you count that, and that's very important. And the thing that was so hard to get used to was being a child of television. I grew up in it. And then going to this movie where they acted as if they had all the money in the world, and probably they did, you know. They would do things that you would never do in television. I mean, they'd think about things, you know, maybe we could change this, and they'd talk about it and stuff. And the man who directed Herbie, that was my first experience, had been an assistant director under Alfred Hitchcock back in England. And so he was an older guy, he was very prim, tougher and wiry guy. He'd be outside on location that was cold as can be, and he's in a short sleeve shirt, you know, just a stiff upper lip kind of Englishman, you know, and a great guy. Well, I was watching him one day on the set. They had a piece of window washing equipment. It was the thing that the window washers stand in, and then they haul that up on the outside of the building. And they work off of storyboards. And in case you don't know what that is, of course you do, but you may not. There are all these storyboards on this board, and it shows you what the shot is going to be all during the day, and they stick to that absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's been approved. You know, already gone through that process, and you got to do it just like it was. And I saw Bob standing there looking at that piece of equipment, and they had posts about this big around, and they were gray, and then the cross bars and stuff, and he was looking at that, and then he'd go over and look at the storyboard picture, and he'd go back over and look at that. Now this took a long time, and you don't do that in television. And then he called over his assistant directors, not just one assistant director, they had several. And they had not painted a little red arrow on that upright pipe. The painters had not done that. And so that had to be done. So we shut down and waited for people to come over from the paint shop. and paint that little arrow on the wall frame. Well, you would never do that in any television show that I was ever associated with.
That director was Robert Stevenson, is that right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Did the pace throw you? The fact that things took so long?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can. It just, whatever you're used to, a change is something that you should expect. But the pace really threw me off a bit. And I did, for instance, having been in television, I did something that television actors do all the time. And I got up at one point and did a scene where I had a monologue, It went on for a few pages. And at the end of it, they said, cut. And the crew applauded. Everybody applauded, like it was something special. Well, it's not special in television. I mean, you have to memorize all those lines all the time. And but they had the luxury of working slower, and so they did,
How did your association with Carol Burnett lead to Mama's Family?
Well, on the Carol Burnett show, there was a series of sketches, none of which I ever appeared in. It was called, they called them the family sketches. And there was Carol Burnett, who played Eunice. Harper was the last name. And then Vicki Lawrence played the mother, strangely enough. That happened sometime during the rehearsal process. They decided to switch. And so Carol became Eunice, and then Mama was Vicki Lawrence, who was much younger than we were. But she put that wig on and that dress with the body pad. She was wonderful. And then Harvey Korman was Eunice's husband. And then part of that group was a brother named Philip, who was played at one time by...
Is it Roddy McDowall? Or?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes. Roddy McDowall did him one time, and also Tommy Smothers did him another time, okay. And I think Alan Alda did him another time. And he was the guy, was the only sensible person in the whole family. And he was like the eyes of the audience. He was walking through, looking at these crazy people, that were his family. And he was a successful writer. He was doing well. And so I never worked in that sketch. But the time came when they were going to do a special, I think it was 90 minutes, and with all of those characters. And so I played Philip in that version, the sensible, successful, young writer.
Was this the TV movie Eunice? It was called Eunice, right? Okay.
Yes, it was called Eunice. The special was called Eunice.
Okay. And
I played the character Philip, which had been played by these other actors before. And so I just got a call and asked if I wanted to do a series based on those characters called Mama's Family. And I said, well, yeah, I've been on the road for a long time, and I wanted to do television again, and I love those people. And so I showed up for work, thinking I was playing Philip, and I wasn't. They got this whole new character called Vinton Harper, who's kind of he's the dumb blonde of the piece, And they always have, people have gotten laughs from a dumb character, forever. And he was the guy. And so this whole new the character that I had to do was a big adjustment, because I was thinking in terms of playing this guy that I could do standing on my ear, just straight ahead, But now I got really nervous about doing an accent. I'm not any good at it. And I hired a guy to help me with the accent, and I had a lot of fun doing it, because he got a lot of laughs where the character Philip didn't get laughs. He was like the straight guy. So, but anyway, I'm working with family, people I know and love, and I had an awfully good time doing that show.
Okay, we'll continue after we change tape.
Yeah.